So, Samantha, the first thing I want to ask you about is if you're willing to share as much as you feel comfortable with about your personal story. I watched your mental health TED style talk about healing the silent family struggle, and I was just impressed with your willingness to share a little bit about where you come from and what your dedication is to serve families.
Absolutely. So my talk on healing the silent family struggle really dives into my life as a teenager, where my sophomore year of high school, I would black out with anxiety every morning the winter of that sophomore year. And as I went through my professional development in my 20s and then even through my 30s, when I looked back on how challenging that anxiety was, how crippling it was, and the burnout that patterning created in my world, I understood that it wasn't about just doing my own healing, but about understanding my parents' backstory and how what was going on in our household contributed to that crippling anxiety. And so part of where I am today has to do with overcoming that anxiety, but also understanding my parents on a deeper level, and as a family, all of us transforming and how we connect and relate.
That's beautiful. That just allows for that compassion and understanding where things are coming from a systematic approach.
Exactly.
Yeah, thank you. So, and by the way, you can check out the link to Samantha's talk right here in the resources. It's a great one. And you don't want to miss it. It's what, like 15, 18 minutes
18
long?
minutes, yes.
Yes. What I really appreciate about you, and part of why I invited you to come talk with us, is that you straddle both spheres. So you understand the educational system, and you are an entrepreneur who, decided to use your gifts and talents to expand the field. So will you share with us a little bit about your professional journey and where you've been and how you landed at the place that you're at now?
Absolutely. So I started my career as a speech language pathologist. I have my master's in communication disorders from the University of Minnesota ever since 2004. And I was really like bright-eyed and bushy-tailed right when I got my degree, and I wanted to specialize in autism. So I moved from Minnesota to Southern California to work at a school specifically with these kiddos ages 3 to 21. So it was this large spread. And what I remember was one little boy in particular, I needed to transition him into my office to work on social skills in a small group. And little Charlie had a meltdown in the middle of the hallway, right outside the cafeteria, with other educators like peering through the door as they were managing, 40 other children. And I remember looking down at Charlie, who's kicking and screaming those things that you never want to hear, but you probably hear a lot of in the educational arena. And I remember looking down at him and thinking, I have a 6-year degree and I have no idea what to do here. So what happened was eventually, I've been in the field for a long time now, so I'm not embarrassed to say that I just eventually bribed Charlie and brought him back. And I just kind of gave up on it that day.
Who can relate to this?
And then when I went into my office, I physically turned off the light, put my head in my hands, and I thought, maybe I chose the wrong job. I felt so distressed that I didn't know how to handle this child when I was so gung-ho about helping kids with special needs, that it really ignited a part of my personality that I hadn't known existed. And it was to really dig into the research and geek out on the brain science to understand what was the missing piece that I hadn't learned and maybe hadn't been taught somewhere explicitly. And what I found was, in order for kids like Charlie to have self-control and emotional engagement, his brain needed to feel calm and safe. So thus began the journey of looking in so many other arenas like sensory integration, which our occupational therapist friends are really skilled at oftentimes, understanding emotional integration, which is work that social workers are doing, understanding play therapy and behavioral management from other perspectives, and eventually decided, there's a whole system here that if we boil it down to 8 behavioral principles, we can help the most intense kids feel calm and safe, become verbal, make friends. You know the impact that has on your own job satisfaction. And so I ended up starting my own business in 2011, having created a parent training to say, if you need some help, because I certainly needed help, and I had a lot of exposure to what was happening with kids educationally, I wanted parents to have those tools too. So now I lead a parent training program as well as certify other professionals who want to become parent coaches.
It's kind of fascinating that you have developed this programming for kids with intense brains, as you call them. Mm-hmm. And, I know you talk about them having fire in the brain, and really it kind of derived from you having the experience of, I have fire in my own brain. I don't know what to do here and what's going on here.
Exactly. And, we traditionally think that those kids who have explosive behaviors, like this idea of their brain is stuck in fight or flight mode and there's fire in their brain, which ultimately means adrenaline and cortisol is flooding their system so they can't do things like problem solving or demonstrate self-control. We typically think that these outward kids have fire in the brain. And what I reflect back on, even to the story of me being a sophomore in high school, I worked with an alternative practitioner who's a homeopath once. And I said, I just don't know why I have so much pressure inside of me. And she knew about my work with intense kids. And she's like, you have an intense brain, right? And I was like, oh, well, now that makes sense. And it opened my world into understanding how much all kids and all professionals, even if we look really buttoned up and put together, if we have that intensity inside, it's really challenging.
Beautiful. So I invited you here to be our guest expert to talk about the moods module because let's face it, you don't have to spend more than 5 minutes in a school setting to be hit with some kind of emotionality from, the students or the staff or maybe parents. You're going to get hit with it from somewhere. And I love that you use the term intense brain kids because it reminds us that what we really need to focus on there, what's really happening that we need to focus on. And it kind of takes some of the stigma and judgment out of that outward behavior that we're seeing. So I kind of, now that you gave me that term and that language to name it, I kind of look at intense brain kids as serving a role to perhaps signal to us maybe what needs to change in our environment or our structure or our culture. Can you speak to us about, what you see intense brain kids communicating to us?
Yeah, yes. So, it can be really easy to think about ourselves all the time. Like, how can I be successful as an educator? How can I be successful as an entrepreneur? But when you see these kids demonstrating these symptoms of dysregulation where they're falling apart and sometimes literally falling on the floor, it invites us to go deeper, I think, in ourselves and say, how can I really serve? How can I really help here? And when we understand that intense brain kids learn self-control by what we're modeling, it allows us to step up our mindfulness game, to allow us to step up our ability for self-care and come into control again so that the world isn't just about us as the adult or the authority figure, but it's about how can I reach out and help this child?
Yeah. And why do you think that's important right now, perhaps especially in schools?
Yeah, well, there's so many decades, maybe hundreds of years of the authoritarian paradigm. Many of us were raised with parents who had an expectation that they wanted for us to obey. And so we were parented accordingly, and that type of patterning has now come into our lives. So when we're adults, it's natural for us to live that out, for us to have an expectation for our students or the children that we're working with, and not realizing that it's not about fixing them so that they come up to our expectation, but it's really about us working in collaboration. So I believe that it helps us be connected in another way. It helps us break that old paradigm. And be in collaboration because kids have a voice too, and they are telling us that they need something different.
Yeah, it's just going back to me to this notion of hierarchical power versus network power. What are they communicating to us here around this notion of power, right? They want a voice. They want some input.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and kids who are more intense or strong-willed or spirited, they actually have a psychological need to be in control. They have a psychological need to control the environment around them, even through negative means. So when Charlie melted down, the control that he subconsciously could be reading into is someone's either going to give up and bring me back, or they're going to connect with me in a way that feels really intense, which actually just reinforces that brain patterning.
So as we look to shift and see some of these intense behaviors as actually a gift of perhaps clarity towards where we need to go, and maybe we even actually think of some of these intense brain kids and their behaviors as leading the way, providing a pivot point for us to transform into something new. That's all great and good, right? Like, okay, there's a gift in this, and we are where we are right now, and where we are is hard and can feel really exhausting. Mm-hmm. So like I hear educators saying the emotions, the behaviors, that's contributing to me feeling burned out at the end of every day over and over again. So if we're going to shift and we're going to try to get proactive and we're going to, try to shift our own mindset and see this as a gift of how we need to pivot and where we need to go, can you give us some tips, like practical tips, maybe 3 practical tips on how we can show up so that we're more proactive instead of being this reactive mode?
Yes. Yeah, it doesn't feel good to be in that burnout mode. And what does feel good as a professional is feeling like you're at the top of your craft. But when you have kids with these meltdown or tantrum behaviors, it's hard to know what to do when the traditional education system hasn't really prepared us for it. So the top 3 strategies I would recommend really begins with understanding how to help kids feel calm. Now, when you're listening to this, please pay attention to 2 lenses. In order to help kids feel calm, you want to understand the tactic that I'm describing, but you also want to reflect on yourself, because if you don't do this internally, implementing this tactic is actually going to be kind of challenging for you. So yes, there's a gift that the children are bringing to us in this world, and by applying these tactics, the gift is that you get to become the better version of yourself as well. So the first strategy is understanding how to create a calm zone for children. So the whole topic of discipline and consequences is popular, and there's so many things that you could do in a school setting. What I would suggest is making sure that you proactively set up in the classroom a group dynamic where everybody understands if somebody is having a hard day, they get to go to the calm zone so that they can find their calm again inside. Reflecting with the students, what does it feel like when you are upset? What does it look like when you're upset? And what does it feel like when you feel calm? What does it feel like when it feels good? Like, what is the emotion associated with that? So not using a calm zone as, oh, Billy's having a hard day, send him out into the hallway or send him to the principal's office, but knowing that this is our opportunity to teach. And the root of the word discipline, do you know what the root of the word discipline means?
To teach?
It is. It's to teach.
Mm-hmm.
So it is helping us be more in integrity as professionals. We literally are teaching these kids how to get calm again. The calm zone might include things like fidget toys. It might include things like those expandable breathing balls. I think they're called the Hoberman sphere. There might be a glitter jar in the calm zone as well, so that if the brain is all stirred up, and you would set this up with kids in advance, they get to watch the glitter settle so that the brain settles as well. Neuroscience shows us that once kids get into a space where they're able to get calm, it takes 30 seconds for the stress chemicals to settle. That is a huge gift that you can teach children, how to actually get calm again. The second tactic is to make sure you're communicating with kids at the emotional level. It is really easy for us to live in a world of so that. So it sounds like this. I get up at 5:30 a.m. so that I can work out on the treadmill for half an hour, so that I can get myself ready for the school day, so that I can get in the car, so that I can prep what I need to for the day, so that when the bell rings, I'm prepared for the children and I can take them through this lesson, so that I can take them through that lesson, so that I can take them through lunch, right? Like there's all these steps along the way that are very task oriented. And if you expand this out, you'd even say, we do all of these things, we get through the meltdown so that the bell rings at the end of the day, so that I can do my paperwork, so that I can get home and have dinner, so that I can do my chores, so that I can drop into bed exhausted at 10 o'clock at night. You following me?
Sounds about right. You see why I brought her.
This world of so that is very task oriented. I believe what these children are teaching us is that us asking them to live in a task oriented world is not good for them, and it is not good for us either. So what we want to do is we want to connect with kids when they're expressing frustration or irritation, like mild to moderate level emotions. If their brain is already on fire, the strategy I'm about to say doesn't work very well, but it works well if you catch them early, if you're really tuned into them and paying attention. So let's say Jessica comes in and you can tell that she's had a rough morning, and maybe a parent even said that. So what you would do is you would acknowledge and validate the emotion by saying, Jessica, you look upset. You would take a moment out of preparing for your next task, and you would connect with the child emotionally. When you label a child's emotion and then you put a period at the end of your sentence, you look upset. The natural next step is for the person who you're talking to express more of that emotion. So she might even burst into tears. Jessica might be like, yeah, my parent yelled at me and I didn't get this done and I didn't get the little homework form signed. And that's okay. Like, we want that to happen so that it doesn't get so bottled up that an hour from now, when you're asking her to do timetable, she reaches out and grabs the kid's paper next to her and rips it because of that stress that's accumulated. So when you label a child's emotion, you stop talking, and then you give them space to process, and then you validate them again and give them space to process, and you validate them again. Like, I can see that was really upsetting. You tend to see kids' body language softening, and they might even kind of like slouch down a little bit, and Jessica could say something like, yeah, that was really hard. So you end that with the directive. Now you can say, and it's time to go sit in your desk. So while this takes extra time at the beginning, it shortens the time that it takes at the end.
This is reminding me, if I can interject for 1 second, just that saying that sometimes we need to go slow to go fast.
Mm-hmm.
So that when we're in that, like, yeah, but I have to do this so that.
Yes.
Just breathing and pausing. Remember, in order to do that, I first need to do this.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Yep, you've got it. And in order to connect with a child emotionally, you have to know where you're at. So if you're starting to get revved up, it's pausing and taking a breath so that you can really be there for children. The third strategy, so we've talked about having a calm zone, we've talked about validating and acknowledging kids' emotions, and then the third one is to create room for happy chemicals. So happy chemicals really just means something that feels good inside. The root, like where this term came from, is when I would go shopping with my 3 sisters and come out of the dressing room. If I wasn't sure if I should buy an outfit or not, one of them would say, oh, I think you should definitely buy that. And if inside I went, okay, like I knew that I had happy chemicals flooding my brain and that was something that would serve me really well. But if they said, you should buy that, and I went, oh, like that inner feeling was telling me that I wasn't aligned and that I really shouldn't buy the outfit. So I've taken this concept over into the professional world to talk about happy chemicals. And with children, the world of so that consistently brings up their stress levels throughout the day because, sitting in a desk and doing homework and doing cognitive tasks and keeping your hands to yourself and getting in line and being quiet, those are all adult activities. That is not a child's natural world. A child's natural world is play and multi-sensory digging in the dirt, and it's so much more creative and imaginative. My encouragement is when you have intense children or any child, it's important for them to have an experience of happy chemicals where throughout the day they kind of stop and they're like, this is fun to be here. I like being around my teacher. I like being around my friends. I like learning. I like school. You can set them up for that by having the structure of your day where, of course, you need to get the math in and the reading in and all of the other things, but not waiting until the end of the day or too late in the day to do something that creates happy chemicals. So if you're an educator for really young children and you have circle time, knowing that it can be fun instead of just sit there with your hands in your lap, which might not be happy chemicals. It might be something like bopping around in the morning instead. knowing that if kids are coming in and you're working with kids who are from like in an at-risk population, maybe what they need are things like sand tables in the morning. And of course, if you have older kids, you would just expand this concept using your own wisdom. But a way to transition in so that they can let all of that stress from the morning roll off their back, and in this new environment they have happy chemicals. If your environment and your persona and way you're connecting with children and setting up their days creates a positive sensation and association, they are more likely to listen, they are more likely to have self-control and be happy children.
So I can completely relate to the happy chemicals thing as from the parent point of view, as somebody who, I'm a high achieving woman, and like on the weekends, I tend to, when I'm rested and energized, I want to be super tasky. I want to get the stuff done, and then I like to play. And it would get so frustrating to me once I had kids that, like, while I'm trying to get the stuff done, because I do want to play with you, they would be interrupting or their behaviors would start to spike. And I don't know how many times I hit my head against the parenting wall, and I still sometimes do. And just that term happy chemicals, like get the happy chemicals flooded. Mm-hmm. That really helped. And sometimes it only takes like 10 minutes of playing with them, or now we take the dog for a walk and we're out in nature and we're moving, and then I can come back and do the tasky stuff.
Yes.
Yeah. So
you've got it. You've got it. And because, just the way that we operate throughout the day is when there are tasks and things that are stressful, the stress chemicals of adrenaline and cortisol build until we interrupt that pattern. So what calms it, you can either calm it, like we were talking about the calm zone where you go and you're soothed and you're just proactively taking care of yourself. Or there's a way to completely input different chemicals like dopamine and oxytocin. So when you're playing with your kids and laughing, well, there's not room for the dopamine and the adrenaline at the same time. So the adrenaline calms down and the dopamine goes up. Well, now you become more resilient and just like kids are able to follow directions.
And yeah, so I am an experiential learner, and it's like I really have learned through experience that when I start out with the focus and the intention and follow through with flooding the happy chemicals, it really, really does make a difference.
Nice.
Yeah. I do have a clarifying question about the first tactic, the creating the calming zone. Mm-hmm. So that's something that we're doing immediately, as we're setting up our classrooms, or maybe at the beginning of the school year. And that's just part of now the environment. And there's like that buy-in early on and setting up that structure. It's not something that we wait until we have an issue or when the issue arises. That's just an integral part of the system from the get-go.
That's right. So when you talk to your classroom of students about the calm zone, it's really just being open with, sometimes we have good days and sometimes we have bad days, or good moments and bad moments. And so we're going to introduce the calm zone, which is where we go when we have a bad moment so that we can feel good again. And so when you let kids practice this, they realize it actually normalizes for them that it's okay to have a bad moment and that they're able to recover. Versus if we send them away, what happens is that can trigger the self-talk of, I'm just a bad kid, I don't know how to recover. We're teaching them hands-on, here's how you recover, and walking them through different activities.
And it's okay to have all the feels.
Absolutely, it is.
Because we're going to have them anyway, right?
Yes,
can we just normalize this, please?
Yes, exactly.
Okay. So I'm thinking, we're talking about getting proactive here, and we heard you reflect on your experience when you came into schools as a professional. I had a similar experience when I came in as a professional. Like, it kind of felt like trial by fire. I had all this theoretical and some hands-on experience, but once the rubber hit the road, I realized there was a lot that I didn't know. My husband happens to be an advisor in a teacher ed program, so he is advising and instructing students who are going to be teachers. What they say, what the students say once they get into classrooms too, is that the skills that we don't feel like we have are those behavioral management, those emotional regulation skills. So what do you recommend? Where do we get our future teachers ready
Yes.
to hit the ground running
Yes.
in a proactive way.
Yeah, we want to give you those. We want all of us to have those tools so that we can go in and create proactive classrooms for sure. And so, I've actually looked nationally. We're filming in the US right now. And so I've looked nationally around where are these programs that teach behavioral management, social emotion, self-regulation skills. And while there are lots of books, some of those classes are few and far between in order to come by. So what I did to help bridge the gap was create an 8-hour behavior boot camp. So it's basically a full day intensive training where schools hire me to come in to give professionals the 8 pillars that help set kids up for success for behavioral control and develop better self-regulation skills using the principles around like how exactly do we manage the classroom structure, how exactly do we add in rewards and breaks so there's happy chemicals, what exactly do calm zones look like. So that's one thing I get hired to come in and teach new and existing educators.
See, this is one of my favorite things about you is that you can take all the theoretical and the complex and you can make it into actionable steps.
Oh, that's right. I'm all about tactical. I like tactics. I like to joke around because my mother is a storyteller and a magician. So growing up, I had like the creative side and I wanted to learn a lot and be exposed to a lot. But then my dad is a project manager and would manage multi-million-dollar construction and power companies. And so it was like really tactical and task oriented. So I kind of learned how to like blend both worlds so that life is fun, but then you also get stuff done.
I love it. So given that you're a communication expert, can you give us an internal dialogue or mantra that we can use to keep ourselves calm as we're dealing with anything that's going on in our lives?
Yes, absolutely. So you mean like something other than, how can I get this to stop?
Correct.
Okay, got it. I know you guys. So if you want to do some more positive self-talk so that you can react more positively to the children, my favorite mantra to teach is calm body, calm voice, calm face. Children who are more intense are just by design in a hypervigilant state. That fight or flight stress response is activated, and that was an important system when we lived in caveman times and we needed to run away from the bear that was chasing us in the woods. We needed to fight or we needed to flee or freeze so that it couldn't see us so that we could be safe. But with children, we're seeing that they are responding to us as though we are the bear and all we asked them to do was sit down and please be quiet. So what you want to remember, because you'll need to say this a lot, like hundreds, thousands of times, is calm body, calm voice, calm face. We all have mirror neurons in our brain that reflect the state another person is in, like a mirror. So when you have a calm body, voice, and face, this becomes activated in children. They learn, oh, that's the way I'm supposed to be behaving, instead of if you get frustrated and irate, their mirror neurons learn that, which really just shoots you in the foot.
So, I mean, literally as you're talking, I'm able to see how the gift is like we have to self-reflect and we have to evolve. Like we have to learn the strategies.
Yes.
For ourselves.
Yeah, self-reflect and self-control. So if we want all these kids to demonstrate self-regulation, they're going to learn it because we're demonstrating to their mirror neurons what self-regulation really looks like.
Mm-hmm. So a lot of us now have heard about the brain-body connection, and it's good to hear it from different angles or filters or frameworks. So can you talk to us from your framework what you know about the brain-body connection and how, the behaviors and emotions, it all runs together in tandem?
Yes. So what we've been talking about so far is the lower part of the brain. And Dr. Daniel Siegel, who's a neuroscientist outside of UCLA, he talks about this fight or flight stress response being in the brainstem and part of the downstairs brain. So what we know is that if this is overactivated, we're going to see challenging behaviors. So what we want to do is we want to make sure we work our way from the bottom of the brain all the way up so that kids have better emotional control. Because if this is out of whack, then emotionally they're going to be out of whack. So if you learn as a professional how to calm challenging behaviors and create structures like the calm zone so they can get into that zone again. Then what we do is we layer in middle brain strategies. This is the limbic system and is responsible for emotional regulation and coping skills. So now you layer in pieces that you've already heard us talk about today, like validating a child's emotions. And when you do that, it connects them to you. So they start feeling bond, they start feeling emotional control, they start feeling part of a community and like they belong in their classroom. And then we layer in this third C. So we've got calm, we've got connect, and then we've got collaborate. And this is all the upstairs brain skills, if you know about the prefrontal cortex, that involves things like actually problem solving, thinking through things, now managing your behavior and knowing like, oh, if I'm in like the red zone right now, here's what I do to help me. So the brain body emotion connection is really scientific in some ways, where if you work from the bottom up, you're going to see kids who are better connected to their bodies instead of impulsive and all over the place, and you're also going to see them with better emotional control.
All of this is just making me realize that it really is an opportunity to evolve, to transform, because you can see how as patterns move from generation to generation, if you're yelled at, if that was the modality of communication in your home setting and you're mirroring that back and your body is developing those patterns, it just kind of passes down generation after generation. And now that we have the technology and the know-how to understand what's happening, we really can start to implement actionable behaviors to make real shifts.
Yes.
Yeah. So it helps me to remember, because it can sometimes seem overwhelming that we all have like different slices of the pie and expertise and understanding of how to do this, and we're doing it together.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And whether you like to geek out on the brain science like I obviously like to do, or you like the more mindfulness route where you're talking about how do we do yoga and breathing and meditation in our personal lives and in the classroom, all of those pieces of the puzzle are important.
Yes. Just even right here, I do not like to geek out on the brain stuff, the body stuff. I don't like to geek out on the stats, the math, whatever. I have friends who do. And so let's do this together.
Yeah.
Samantha and I actually met when I was in the throes of the early childhood days of parenting, and which was like a gift. Because I was, as an educator, as a psychologist, I was in it at my job all day, and then I would come home and I was in it with the kids. And it is, dealing with my kids in the way that I had been parented was something else that was contributing to my burnout. So I tended towards being enabling and coddling and helicoptering. I can see that now. That was just normal, right? And so I did Samantha's Mad2Glad program, and what I found was that we had been trying all these various other programs, and it was like the minute that something didn't work, I was like, there was just like tweaks that needed to happen, I would kind of like shut down, like, oh, let's try something else. And so what I learned after working with you and doing the program was just stick to one thing. The consistency, it kind of had elements of all of these focused into one program. Mm-hmm. And if Tyler and I, as the parents, could just focus there and stick to it and be consistent and be as calm as possible in the process, then our kids, of course, responded in turn.
Yeah. Yes.
So, yeah, I thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
For essentially writing the book on parenting. Everybody is like, who wrote the book on this? Samantha Moe did. And can you say, too, what other educators that you've worked with, mm-hmm. What are they telling you about their experiences being with kids all day and then coming home to their own kids?
Yeah.
This is real.
It is real. It is real. I work with a lot of educators and people in the counseling and therapy fields. And you all know about mom guilt, and you add on the fact that you're working with kids all day long and you're being really patient and calm and positive with them, but then you come home and you're yelling, or you're letting them get away with whatever they want, or you're bribing, or you're getting stuck in negotiations and there's like yelling at bedtime. Like there's so many normal parenting experiences that occur even for educators and counselors. So, what I always like to look at is let's look at why underneath all of this. Like, let's look at why you give up once you go home. And maybe you are burnt out. So let's look at it not just from a tactical perspective of how to positively engage your child or discipline them, which you already know, but the parent and life coaching field is looking at that emotional piece too, right? Like, so what does it feel like when you're enabling your child? What are you hoping is actually going to happen? And if I were to ask you that question, what is the answer?
So, yeah, I can see now that my enabling and kind of coddling behaviors were coming from a place of love and wanting them to not experience pain or hardship, wanting to make it like soft and safe and easy, except that what I recognize now is I was also robbing them of their opportunity to grow.
That's right.
And experience the full range of life and understand that they could themselves, within themselves, and that empowering from within, that they could ride out some of the hardships, and I could be there to support, but I couldn't take on that emotional burden for them.
Exactly. So we want to look at that short-term impact and then the long-term impact. So yes, you felt like they were going to be happier in the moment because you were over providing for them, but there was a cost, and the cost was for you, and the cost was a long-term cost for them. So once you understand how your parenting approach impacts your children, it's not just let me layer on the tactics. It really is about the why behind it. And so that's what I feel really passionate about, and why I'm not just a traditional parent educator, which are incredible and they're really good at tactical tools and directing you to books and resources, but I'm a parenting coach to say, like, let's look at this whole picture here and the emotional piece, because if we start pulling the thread, then we can pull an emotional thread and disentangle it. Now the tactical pieces, you naturally do them and you become more consistent.
Well, and I just want to add in this piece here too. One of the first things I did working with one of your coaches was the marriage piece. We had to explore our marriage and the parenting styles, because that had created so much tension because we had come from different parenting styles. So not only do you have your generational stuff, it's like you throw them both in the mix and the kids are like, what?
Yes, exactly. You got it.
So I know that since that time that I was working with you and your folks, that you have evolved and expanded. So will you tell us what you're currently offering and up to?
Yeah. So I really started with the parent training. There's an 8-week online parent training that has the tactics that involve techniques that aren't always new to every single person, right? Like staying calm isn't a new idea.
Sure.
Even emotionally validating, it's not a new idea. But if you have one without the other, or you start working on discipline before you've worked on calm and validation, what's going to happen is you don't have enough emotional currency built up. So discipline's not going to work. You're still going to get kids who are rebellious and retaliating against you because there's not enough emotional currency really in your relationship. So moving past that, just like the work you do with 20 kids, might be more, there was a point where I wasn't satisfied just working with 20 families a week. And so I have trained other people to become certified parent coaches. So it's a 6-month online training program that involves self-study for, lessons each week, and then group discussion calls and group coaching, so that you not only learn the skills, but you have a transformational experience in a community of like-minded professionals who really care about the tactics and the why and how they're showing up at the same time.
Yeah, and I love that you've created that space for people to come and do this work and explore perhaps a different way to do things. And we are, so many of us who are educators, it's a vulnerable position to be like, hey, this is my field, or, counselors, mental health professionals, this is my field, and yet in the home setting, I'm experiencing all of this and I don't know what to do about it, or I'm too exhausted to put much energy into it. Just to be able to come to somebody such as yourself and kind of lay that all out there, and then from there you can work towards something newer, different, or better.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And to draw, like, every person who enters the community, it's not just about, one person is leading this community and I'm not just the teacher or the leader, but it's that everyone's bringing in a piece of the puzzle. So somebody who specializes in trauma, somebody who specializes in fetal alcohol exposure, everyone's bringing that wisdom in, and it fits together really nicely. So you not only learn the tactics that will help you across the environment that you're working with, but you're contributing to others.
That's beautiful. I just remember when I started to dig into your material, I was like, oh, I wish somebody would have taught me this earlier, or taught so many of us this earlier. And then I had to go right into like, wait, no, and I'm so glad that it's here now.
Yes.
Let's focus on that. It's here now, and we just get to keep, spreading it and evolving it. So
one of my favorite proverbs is a Japanese proverb, and it goes like this. It says, when was the best time to plant a tree? 20 years ago. When is the second best time? It's today.
Now. Beautiful. Okay, so just a couple more questions here. You are somebody who's clearly like living a full throttle life. What do you do to prevent burnout personally?
Yeah, number one is I make sure I take a lot of time unplugged. So I make sure that there are weekends dedicated every month where I'm literally unplugged. So my phone ringer is turned off. I don't go and see movies, which is something I do enjoy doing during the week. And I just make sure I'm spending time away from Wi-Fi and out in nature. When I'm unplugged and I just get to free flow, that happy chemical really rises in me. I'm actually a really down-to-earth, nature-oriented person, so that's really important for self-care. The second thing that I do pretty consistently is I do things around habits. So I find that to keep my life full and keep myself sane, I don't want to make new decisions every day about like, what do I eat? Do I exercise today? Do I not exercise? Do I socialize today? Do I not? So I've created a schedule where I make sure those pieces are in each day and I don't vary too much from that rhythm so that I don't get decision fatigue. And I'm constantly having self-care.
Wow, okay.
And so the variety of that, like right now I've chosen to do a commitment 40. So I'll commit to something every 40 days as a baby step to get into my schedule. So for example, right now I did some blood work recently as far as like what foods am I eating that I'm having like an allergic reaction to. And so my commitment 40 is not eating those foods.
Wow. Cool. Thank you for sharing. And of course we have to ask our last closing questions. What have teachers meant for you in your life?
Yeah, I love teachers. I was really surprised the first time somebody called me a teacher because I didn't realize that's what I was doing, and I have so much regard for teachers. And it goes back to first grade. I had a teacher named Mrs. Clark, and I had an articulation disorder. Some of you already know what that jargon means. It basically means I couldn't say my R sound. So here I am in first grade, and I couldn't say my R sound, and I didn't know that I couldn't say it. Except that one day, I was saying goodbye to Mrs. Clark, and we lived just right across the street from the elementary school, so I was lingering, and I got to take my time because I just walked home. And I said to her, "Goodbye, Mrs. Clark," and I got a really nice R in there, and she looked at me, and she said, "You said it. You said Mrs. Clark," and my face lit up, and I said, "I did. I said Mrs. Clark. I said Mrs. Clark," and like I couldn't say it again. It was 3 years later that the school actually enrolled me in speech therapy because my R sound never stuck, like it didn't change. But the point of this is I never knew that I had a speech impediment or an articulation disorder because Mrs. Clark used positive praise and she really saw me. And so, I mean, like I've just always had a positive association with my teachers.
Oh, that's lovely. Okay. While you have the ear of educators here, any last words you want to say to them directly?
Yeah, what you do matters. The work that you do really matters. And I know we all go through those moments where we learn a lot of things and we self-reflect. And this is an amazing program that you're experiencing with Betsy here. And our tendency can be to think about all the ways that we need to change and how we need to improve. And I just want to remind you that just you showing up with an open heart, like willing to see children, willing to practice your own self-control, is not something that all children are exposed to. So even if that's the baseline that you're starting with today, remember that you matter.
Ah, thank you.
Mm-hmm.